in terms of like the music becoming a job, and then eventually not starting to get to the point where I didn't really do any other jobs. I mean, I do a lot of different things, but yeah, it's a funny thing when you realize that like at the beginning you're starting a band, it's 100%. I mean, you have ambition, but it's 100% just trying to conjure magic with friends, and you never have. You're pretty realistic about the possibility of it, of being able to only do that and quit your. So we were always like, we always knew that it was a huge long shot that we'd ever be able to like actually quit our jobs.
But
and
you
we
were around bands who were doing it.
Who had just quit their jobs.
Yeah, and like being in New York, being in that time.
I mean, like everybody I knew around that time, like Interpol and the Walkmen and all those people, I think most of them all did have jobs. Like, even, I don't know, it's a good question. Like when did those other people decide like they just didn't have to do anything anymore? I don't know, but the National, everybody worked, kind of had full-time jobs for the first 5 years, maybe even longer, so we would, I was a creative director and I had a big team of people, but then I would take like, 3 weeks sabbatical or whatever every once in a while, and go on tour, then go right back to it. And yeah, but for a long time, Aaron also worked in Scott. We all kind of worked in the same industry, and we were often competing with each other for clients and stuff.
That's funny.
With our companies and stuff. But
what were you doing? You were doing.
I was
something...
a graphic designer, and Scott was a graphic designer, and Aaron was more business development at another, at the time, new media company.
And this is the .com boom.
This was the .com boom.
You were there.
Yeah. I moved to New York in '96 and started working for a company that did were a company that was doing early digital interface designs, like kiosks for banks and touch screen kiosks for banks and stuff. And it was right at the beginning, like the email was. I remember the first year I was working, we were all learning like how to use email. Email was brand new, and everything like websites and designing in HTML, and designing that way, and it was kind of incredible. And I remember I felt like we were, as a graphic designer, it was trying to form how information is communicated and how people interact with these websites, these screens, and they were scrolling up and down, and it was even before like should websites screen sideways, scroll sideways or up and down. Now they do both on our phone, sideways and up and down. But all that stuff, it felt like it was like the printing press had just been invented, and we were I was one of the first people trying to figure out how this new form of reading and news and information, and then it all became about like purchasing. And so even like I designed like one of the first big websites for the Metropolitan Museum of Art.
Okay.
And I was really focused on like, how do you create this? How do you try to create the experience of going to that museum on your computer, right?
It's like has a personality, right? Like the UX design has a personality.
Yeah, and we were trying to figure out the user interface and everything for the Metropolitan Museum of Art. But it was even then. This was like around 2000 or whatever, in early 2000s, and even then, the Metropolitan Museum of Art knew that the main reason they wanted a website is to channel people to the store, so they could buy totes and ties and scarves and bags and trinkets and gifts. It was all about sending people to the gift shop.
Okay, the conversion rate.
That's when I was like, oh, I don't know. I'm not really an artist. I'm a and as a graphic designer, art is part of it, but it's you're a plumber, you're an information plumber for a client who needs to sell product. I still consider myself a graphic designer, as much as I am a songwriter. But definitely the sort of just the philosophies of design, and even like the working with a team to try to pull it together, and understanding, in songwriting. Scott and I specifically would often talk about the songs, using visual terms, and like, this, it needs a splash of color here. You need, every piece of good design has a whole, level of information it's feeding you, and what's the main takeaway, but then what's all the other little, and a song is the same way. You need the right balance of the stuff that isn't the title, isn't the bullet, isn't the chorus or the takeaway line, but it supports. And I often described it, because my design professors would describe design like cooking, where it's like, if you're making a pasta, or like, some sort of Italian, pasta is part of it, but then there's how much sauce, and then how much, how many meatballs, and whatever the thing, and you have to kind of balance that all. Can't, if it's too much sauce, it's going to ruin it. And if it's all pasta, but you need the pasta. And so when it comes to songs, it's like the pasta, sometimes is the best part, is the verses, but you kind of need those saucy moments. You need the bursts of flavor, and and so a good song has to have a good balance of, just like a good design does. It has to have a balance of what you're experiencing on your palate, or in your head and your mind. And the song's the same way. So, I do think of that stuff a lot when writing songs.
You can hear that in the National. And I think maybe one way to describe the result is that the National is kind of a hard band to describe sonically, like your solo records are a hard music to describe sonically, but you can say how it makes you feel.
Yeah.
And you have a place for it. I think for a lot of people, it's like late night drives or early morning, going to the airport.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting thing to think about. Like, well, what is when people think of our band or listen to our band, like being in it, you don't know where it fits on the spectrum of music, really. I mean, I do kind of, but yeah, that's a really, what is it about? Like, what is the chemistry of the National, or what is the chemistry of my voice with the way my brain works, and the types of lyrics I'm writing, and like, how much of that chemistry is unavoidable sometimes, is like no matter who I write with, whether it's Elvi stuff or solo stuff or National stuff, or whoever I'm writing with, like, is it just always going to sound just like me, and that's going to put it into a pocket no matter what.
I can imagine you can get in your own way as well, because if you think about that, I mean, how do you not think about the main thing you're trying to do? But it seems like getting out of your own way. I mean, people talk about that all the time, that kind of idea of, not tripping yourself up with your own kind of thoughts.
Yeah.
How have you done it? How have you tried to do that?
Well, I mean, I often get to places when I feel like, I'm writing another song for the character of Matt Berninger, the lead singer of the National, right? Because that's because that bit over 25 years, there's a, for lack of a better word, there's a brand around that guy. And
he's the wine smoking
guy
that goes out to the crowd.
Yeah, borderline. I always joke about it, this like borderline alcoholic college professor type of thing, all those things, and they fit in a lot of ways. But that sometimes I'll find myself, I think I feel like, I'm just writing more scenes for that character. I'm not really being honest, so a lot of the times I'm trying to deconstruct, or step a little bit away from, even though that character and the brand and all those things that go with it, they fit. You find it's easy to find yourself just kind of like walking around in your own footsteps sometimes, and you have to remind yourself like, no, just go left instead. You always go left or go right or go straight forward or go back. Or you like make a different move.
Are there physical things you've been able to do to try and get out of that? Like, I don't know, learn surfing or like read a different type of book or.
Yeah, I mean, well, one of the things I've done for a long time, but just is I used to fill up notebooks. You know, so many notebooks get filled up with stuff, and then I switched to mostly writing on my phone, right? And that it's faster, it's more practical, but then there's something you start to feel cold and like just like you're on your phone all the time, and then you start to associate like when you're songwriting, you want to be lost in a special weird place, and the phone being a tool to help you write, but it's also sucking you back into all of the stuff. You kind of like you want to get your head away from all that stuff. So I would write on whiteboards and do lyrics right on whiteboards and while we're working on songs. And then I started writing in other books, and I started writing on everything. I started writing on whatever was around, you know, pieces of wood. And then in
piece of wood.
Yeah, I mean like just
with pencil.
Well, just a lot of it's just like not to touch your phone, maybe get off, get you know, stand up, walk around. Like my mom has always had an art studio, and she's just the walls are covered with just her favorite quotations and thoughts, you know.
Nice.
And every time somebody visits, she asks them to write something, anything on the wall.
That's a nice idea.
Yeah, and so and I've always done that with my daughter and stuff. Just like the walls are, like we can paint over whatever you want, but if you want to draw on the walls, do it. You know, it's like make your environment your use everything. And then I started writing on baseballs a lot because baseballs are just a incredibly perfectly weighted thing, and they feel so good in your hand, and you just lay on the couch. And I think I started writing and just like turning a baseball around and writing, just free associating and writing it on baseballs. It's not like I'm not necessarily songwriting when I'm doing that. I'm just generating fragments and just letting your mind just skip around and without any and somehow it also slows me down. So when you're writing on a baseball or writing on something that's not just your phone, it just forces you to kind of like just pull the throttle back on the way my brain usually goes fast and long, and you know I'm hard to stop, you know, sometimes. But the slowing down and the writing on baseballs or other things is just a way to make it tactile.
Yeah.
No phone, slower. And then you just kind of like, as you spin this baseball around in your hand, you know, and I'll smoke weed and drink a cocktail and I got a fire going. You start to, your brain starts to put words together differently. You start, as you turn it around, you start to see they bump up against each other in different ways, as opposed to just like writing, you know, 5 words and another 5 words, and you know, like line after line in your phone or in a notebook. Just the physical line lengths of a little moleskin notebook are creating a little bit of a cage, you know. And then when you write on, you know, a pumpkin or I wrote a long thing. I took a baseball bat and started at the top and just went all the way down the thing and wrote this whole long thing. And then I put pins in the baseballs and the whatever they are, and the bats or whatever the thing I'm working on to show the line breaks and stuff. So it's a little bit like punctuation.
Yeah.
And then you get this cool, weird looking piece of art. And then and there may be the parts of a song in there, but a lot of it's so like, oh, I know I wrote some good stuff on that one baseball that has, you know, I'll throw paints on them and stuff, and just they're not just in these like black little notebooks, moleskin notebooks, or they're not just somewhere in a file on your phone or in like, you know, some Word document. They're all right there. They're like up on the wall. They're on those whiteboards. I'll write in novels, you know, if I'm reading a novel.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a hard time like getting through a novel because every paragraph it'll trigger me to think about something and then I'll start writing in my head. And then I used to like have to put a put the novel down and go find my notebook or do a switch. Now I just I just always have a pen and whatever. If it's a magazine or a novel and I'll have lyrics, that's something I'll just write in the thing.
Yeah.
And so like, I'll remember like, oh, I wrote a pretty good song when I was, on the plane when I was reading The Sun Also Rises, and I was like, oh, there it's right there. The Sun Also Rises is right there, or whatever novel. It's easy to find, you know? So taking my writing out of the phone and out of the Word documents and all that stuff and putting it on whiteboards and baseballs or whatever else it is helps my brain remember where everything is and find it again.
Your house is going to be a museum for your kids in 10 years time, 20 years time. It'd be like, oh, that's the baseball that Dad wrote that.
I have a barn now, and it's just and it was filled with a bunch of shit when and instead of throwing it all away, I just I started taking apart old IKEA beds and stuff like that were just weird old tools, and then putting them back together into sculptures and weird shapes and puppets and things. And then I don't know if I'll ever do anything with it, but then I'll do that and I'll start writing a weird song about an IKEA puppet, or whatever that is, so it's just like unplugging some of the wires that your brain has always been working like this, and those wires always work the same way, and then just yank all the wires out and put them all in different places, and that's part of the process. And so I'm trying to often unlearn what I've taken 25 years to learn. I want to kind of unlearn it, so it feels like that. Towards the beginning, when you're writing a song, you don't know how to write a song. It's so exciting. Then after you've written 100 songs and you're like, oh, hey, we know how to write songs now. There's like shit. We have to like keep writing good songs. It's much more fun when you force yourself not to know how to write a song. You kind of put yourself in a corner. When you put yourself in a corner creatively, that's when you are forced to discover something new. It's what's fun about it. It's the challenges of it's so hard to make any kind of art that anybody's going to respond to. And that's why it's so exciting. It's like you're trying to conjure magic. You're trying to create something that's actually moves people or touches people in a way that you can't explain. Why are some songs just unbelievably effective and moving, and then 1,000, sometimes 100 other songs by the same artist don't get anywhere near it? But there's that one or two or three. The elusiveness of something great is why you crave it so much. And you keep looking for it. And so I'm addicted to the more failures I have along the way, the more addicted you get to proving, no, I gotta find that magic again. I know I'm capable of magic. That's a real addictive thing. It's like and that's psychological. It's like I was reading this thing about your feeds on your social medias thing. They purposely feed you stuff that they know you're not going to be that interested in. They flood it with things that are going to be like on a level 4 or 5 interest you, so that when they give you the thing they know you like, you've had to wait for it. And your dopamine is that much higher when you get that click. And that's why, like, you'll see if you're scrolling through your Instagram or whatever, suggested for you, and a lot of them, it's baby elephants, cuddling or whatever they are, all that kind of stuff.
That's the good stuff.
They know that triggers everybody, and they scientifically they know how much dopamine, whatever. Clingy puppies, gives everyone. And so they give you a little bit of that stuff, but and then it's like just weird stuff. You're just like, but that's kind of on purpose, apparently. Like they if every little thing was good, you'd get stuck on it, and you'd read it. But they want you to see thousands of things as much as possible, ads going by. And so the movement, the scrolling past and not being satisfied with what you're being delivered is how it's addictive. It's when they don't get it. That's when it's like gambling.
Right.
It's gamblers aren't addicted to winning. They're addicted to almost winning. And it's right outside the reach, you know.
Yeah.
It's like romance too. It's like you want the thing that you just don't have yet. That thing that you know, if you're denied it, you want it all the more. So coming back to songwriting, what does that mean? I guess it's back to the whole idea of like writing, trying to write songs, and like at the beginning, we're like like just loving music so much, and think like I could, the bands that made me believe I could do it. We're Smiths and REM, and then Pavement and Guided by Voices, and
GBV are a good example because
they were just fearlessly all over the place, fearlessly going for big Beatles hooks, but then just one after another, and the way Bob Pollard or Stephen Malkmus or Michael Stipe's brains put words together is so beautiful, and so but and I think Bob Pollard is somebody who's addicted, absolutely addicted to writing, to that thrill of a new song, that new, like, is it going to be Gold Heart Mountaintop, Queen Directory? Is it going to be, because he admits he writes like 15 songs a day, sometimes, and then that's what was so powerful about those records. But then, like, every record is 20 songs long, and it's 3 or 4 of them out a year. It starts to be hard to like sift through. And it's just another example of like as an artist, I don't know, there's these phases where like whatever you're doing just catches and works, and you might not be doing anything different, but it's
not in control of it in any way.
It's also the culture comes around it and really gets into it. Yeah, Guided by Voices and Pavement absolutely changed the way I thought about songwriting. Before them, I was trying to write like Leonard Cohen or all these, but those bands made me really like, wow, you can, that was Stephen Malkmus, there's real genuine high level of poetry happening, the way both of their minds work, very, very Frank O'Hara stuff going on, and John Berryman in the way, and Bowie does that too. I've always made this joke that I'm only right about my creative decisions 51% of the time, right? Where it's like 49 out of 100 of my decisions are mistakes, but 51 I get right, and that's all. That's why I have faith. I'm like, well, I'm gonna trust myself, because I know, okay, that's how I believe in Vegas, and so but that can lead you down a path where like I've really learned more to like to listen more to my collaborators, and absorb their good ideas, but then reject, if I still just like, my gut says that song isn't working, just I try to stick, you have to just have some blind faith in yourself. And I think I'm lucky that I do have pretty healthy ego, whether maybe that's unhealthy, but like,
you can call yourself out and be like, that, that's not.
I admit when I'm wrong, but I will. I'm pretty stubborn. I will fight for things where I know that I might be wrong about this, but I just, even if I'm just 51%, I will fight all the way.
Did you have that on Get Sunk? Did you have any particular tracks on Get Sunk that?
Well, I mean,
you fought for?
I mean, Sean and I don't really fight. Well, no, we do. I wrote 6 of the songs with Sean, 4 of the others with some other people, and then now I've this whole band that came together for right after Serpentine Prison, and so everybody was involved more. It was a much more like Get Sunk, and now what we're doing now. But Sean and I, Sean O'Brien is produced Get Sunk, and he co-wrote 6 of the 10 songs with me, and I've been working with him on a lot of national stuff for a long time. Where we would get into tension, is when I would want to throw away everything we'd worked on for 2 weeks, but, and there's one song on the record called Nowhere Special, which I had written several different songs to it, and each time, like, he's like, that's perfect, and then I'd listen back to it and I'd like, no, I like I'd try to rewrite a whole different song. The music was not really changing, the music was kind of had this like beautiful, uh the music didn't need anything, but every time I sang over it, it suddenly ruined the song. Like a song just didn't work over the music. So we were gonna and so every time I threw away and I said nope, it would break his heart. And then finally at the very end, I just did this like stream of consciousness mixed with just like all the leftover lyrics that I couldn't figure out how to use, and then I kind of put them all together. And it's and there's more words in it than the whole rest of the record put together. But that was one of those ones where like, oh, now that's a new thing. That's a. I mean, I've done like long, loquacious stream of consciousness songs before with the National, I've done it before. But this took me forever. I kept banging my head against the glass window. I kept banging my head against the glass window of the song, and finally just smashed through. And all of a sudden, like, oh, fresh air came in. Like, there's something different, and even all those other songs were all B pluses, in my head, but they weren't A's, they weren't, uh, and so I just finally just hit my head against that song one more time, and like this and this, out of desperation, something new happened. I was in a corner, we needed another song, and I was literally out of money, out of time. And the first lyrics of the song explain that I'm late for a meeting to try to explain the record because I'm out of money and out of time, because it was all true. I was late for a meeting, and I was like, oh wait, this is more fun. And so I just kind of just jumped off, and 2 hours later we had the song done, and it was a song that was like 5 months we've been trying different things with it, and it wasn't until like we just burned it all down, and then 2 hours later we had something new. And so those are the kind of moments that you're like, oh, I love this, I love making this stuff.
It's a great record. I've been running to it, I've been jogging to it, quite a slow paced jog, a light jog. I can't run very fast.
There's some, yeah. I mean, honestly,
it's a good running record. It's a propeller of a record. It pushes forward.
It makes you speed up, and then then there's some songs that you can sit down on the bench too.
Yeah, that's my break time.
Yeah, right. It's a record you can jog while you smoke weed too. It's kind of one of those kind of jogs. I think I do a lot of writing like when I'm just walking in the woods or riding my bike, and you're out riding your bike or in the woods or doing something else or tossing baseball with somebody, or even like out getting drunk with friends at a bar, somebody says something, like that's where the best language happens, the real raw stuff. That's like finding creatures in the garden, as opposed to trying to like, create a creature and package it in a little. I need a bunny, and sitting in front of a paper and to draw a bunny. Like no, you don't. You didn't want to draw a bunny. You want to go out find the weird, snake, albino snake that's out there. You want you wouldn't be able to find that if you're just sitting. So you kind of have to put your brain out into the woods, and by putting your brain into the woods or like some other activity, that's when I think really good writing can happen for me.
Find new things.
Yeah.
London's a special place for the National.
Yeah.
You can tell it every time I've seen you in London. There's an energy. There's like a real palpable energy. Has that got something to do with those early shows at the Buffalo Bar?
100%.
Meeting the record label?
Definitely.
Feeling like could I say like, kind of real band?
Yeah. Well, I mean, Roger Trust, who is, he's not involved with the label anymore, but he was a guy who found us, and we'd come to Europe, and but he came to a show. I think he came to a show in Paris or something. He came to see something because he had heard some and he's and he signed us to Beggar's Banquet, the label. And he was our champion towards the he was our main champion. And then and then Beggars became in 4AD, and that whole group, they kind of combined. But so we've been working with the same people and I work with my solo stuff. I'm doing it with a different label, but it's still it's still because of Roger and and when we did come to like places like Buffalo Bar and the 100 Club and all those kind of things, that was the thing that I think put us on the map. We were in New York, we were in the shadow of the Strokes and Interpol and yeah yeah yeahs and TV on the radio. Those were the ones that like we were bumping our heads up right underneath them. We're like, and
I like that joke
rightfully
about.
so.
I hope. I read this in the 33 and a third book, where I think one of you said, "Oh, I hope one of the members from Interpol forgets their suit tonight because
Yeah.
maybe they can't play and we can play
No, I
take
mean,
their slot."
we learned so much from all those bands. I mean, seeing those bands, we opened for the Walkmen. We really we were tinkering away and trying to find our chemistry, all in the shadows of all that stuff. Thankfully, because it was good for us not to get too much attention for the first few years
Because
because
you're learning, you're growing.
yeah, we hadn't really kind of found, and those bands came out of the gate with chemistry and just instant chemistry, instant like the Strokes. Nothing. It was still. I don't think I've seen a better live show than some of those early Strokes shows at like Dawn Hills and Mercury Lounge and right around the Modern Age EP when it was just popping right at the beginning. Um, they they were just unbelievably captivating and charismatic, and every one of them was I saw them a bunch of times before we even ever played at Mercury Lounge, and yeah, that was oh, those like you can't have any fear. You have to
Right.
just be
How would you describe that feeling in the room?
of watching those guys.
Yeah, in those venues like Mercury Lounge. I mean, what they like
Uh,
200 cap sort of.
I mean, just I mean, being in a band, and I was already in a band, trying and living in a loft out in Brooklyn. Seeing the Strokes was humbling, unbelievably humbling. Seeing all those bands was humbling, um, and motivating for sure. And but more than that, or well, yeah, it was just magical. It was you couldn't. It was one of those times where you're like, this is the best room. I know I'm in the coolest room on the planet right now. I mean, the girls that were there. There was like it was beautiful women everywhere. Those guys were so cool. Everybody's smoking and drinking, and it was really And then everybody spill out, and everybody end up in the same bars afterwards.
Yeah.
I went to Mars Bar after a Strokes show with my girlfriend, and and she was from Sweden, and Julian Casablanca was over at the corner of the bar, and we were like, 20 or 30 feet away, and he was just. He was just staring directly at my girlfriend. The whole she's there, and he's just staring at her, and like and she's like, I was like, is he still staring at you? And she's like, yeah, and and I was, and he could have gone home with anybody that night. Like if he'd walked over to her and been like, hey, you want to hang out? I would, like, both of us would have been like, you can't say no. He was so sexy and cool, and anyway, so yeah, so seeing those guys and being in the shadow of their orbit, I wasn't in there. We weren't buddies. I didn't know anything.
What like a learning place though? What like a learning ground?
Yeah, it
To
was
think.
yeah, I mean, sometimes a place in an area, a bunch, just everybody gets so pumped up about in the Lower East Side, and right around that time, the early aughts, and was genuinely uh, surreal, and the most electric feeling, going out on a night Lower East Side to see there were so many venues. Spoon would be playing, and then Walkman would be over here, and Interpol would be over here, and every show I would see would just be like really. I forget how incredible New York was right then, and we were also lucky to be learning from it. We rode that wave. We rode the coattails of that scene for sure. but luckily we could never be like the Strokes. We could never be like Interpol. I mean, a little bit, I guess, we have similar drummers with similar obsessions and stuff like that. But the chemistry of the National could only be a certain type of thing. And so all the bands that came out, I mean, Libertine's brilliant, but also just kind of right on the heel. So many bands were not mimicking, but channeling the same kind of thing that the Strokes and all those bands were doing, and they were much better at it than we were, and they got big briefly, and I mean, some of them got huge, and they're still huge, but since we never could quite. Once we got in on, we kind of got in the door about being from Brooklyn and that thing, but soon it was like just as people were starting to like get sick of all the copycats, Jet and all, I mean, I don't want to disparage any bands because but there were a lot of bands. People got tired of bands not having a new identity, and we had an inscrutable identity. It was like you said, it's really kind of hard. And so in a funny way, the fact that nobody could, like, we weren't as cool as the Strokes or Interpol. We weren't that. It was something weird and something other that people couldn't quite put their finger on. Turned out to be the best thing for us. The awkwardness of our chemistry became what was magical about it.
And we are awkward people. Like, if you're a fan, you don't always want to wear a leather jacket. That wasn't me in school. I felt other, and I was like, I like the weirdest stuff, and I didn't know how to dress like a fashionable person.
No, well, I think bands like Pavement. I mean, Pavement, looked like they never looked like they had any conversations about what they were going to wear to a photo shoot. They look like they're on a canoeing trip, or not even. They look like they're packing to go on a canoe trip. They're not even wearing their canoe trip outfit. It's just so random, So they had like no style, and that was what's so cool, And then there's Guided by Voices, where he's like, he's a school teacher. He's a weird, Ohio beer drinking school teacher. That's not a model we've seen before.
You don't see that in the shops.
Yeah, and so I was always I think in a funny way, most people couldn't really identify with Interpol or the Strokes because you couldn't be that cool. They just had it. They're just fucking cool. It's like some the Stones are just fucking cool. And other and so if every other band trying to act like the Stones, you can't do it. So the fact that we couldn't come off as cool as those other bands gave us our own. I think ultimately people connected and related to us because we did look like we were kind of a bit awkward and a bit. I think I'm easier to identify with for most bumbling, insecure people.
And that ages well.
Yeah, that ages well. Yeah.
We're running out of time. Thank you very much for
the
chat. I appreciate you. I know that you had a difficult time in 2020, and I wonder. Lots of people have, almost everyone probably has difficult times in their life at one point or another, earlier or later on in life. What got you through that difficult patch of your life?
Well, the difficult patch was a patch of like serious depression, just more than your average depression. And that was triggered by a anxiety, the pandemic, lots of things. And once I was in that place. It was I had never quite been in that, like, couldn't get out of bed kind of depression. It lasted for a long time. I honestly, there wasn't, eventually there were some antidepressants that kind of helped, but the truth was, it was just rest and time, and just kind of trying to get out of the house and get exercise, and then kind of getting back to work. It was a real slow. I would say anybody who's like suffering from there's all kind of different versions of it, but like sometimes it's like people just have a low level depression all the time, and I think most people probably do. But this was a thing that it was a deeper phase. And I guess I've learned that like sometimes you have to just hold on, and it'll be it'll take time and to come out of it. And it's a mysterious thing. I've talked to a lot of people. David Letterman describes it. I had a long talk with him about it. And and he says, when I talked to the doctor, he said, it'll probably last about a year. And he's like, and that turned out to be right. And I was like, yeah, it was about me too. It was just like, it was about like a solid year of it being much worse than average. Yeah. So kind of, there was a moment where it's like, once I kind of processed that, like, okay, this is just you're going to come out of this slowly. That was a relief to know that, like, this thing, like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I just be happy again? Where is it? Where did it go? Where did my bravery and happiness go? It just is gone and it'll never come back. When you realize that, like, no, this happens, it comes back slow. And it trickled back, and it trickled back by just being around people and getting, just realizing that how much joy there is in every little, when you're depressed, you can't find joy in anything. You can't find joy in a butterfly or your favorite TV show, and that's a sickness. So when you're in that phase, it's like there's something chemical going on, and you have to address it like it is like a flu. But then it's also a thing. It's kind of like, okay, you can't just pile a bunch of cold medicine on it. It's gonna be a slow. Yeah. It's almost like letting like a broken leg heal. It takes a while till you can run on that leg again.
Do you remember the first time you could run on that leg again? Was there like a day or like a?
No. Like as I said, it was never. It was bit by bit, and I guess the way I could really tell I was coming out of it was not. It was like months into touring with the National. We were back on the stage, and we had put a record out, and and working on the record and finishing the record. But it was like, as the shows went on, and as because that's when I could really feel that, like, stepping onto stage and just having not being able to look at the crowd, just having no comfort in my body, where I'd lost all that kind of. I'd lost my all confidence and all whatever, lost it all. And so, and it was most acute standing in front of 1,000 or 5 or however many people were playing in front of that night, and realizing, oh, I'm under lights and everybody's staring, and I'm still I still can't turn it on. And that's when I was like, oh, so every show, slowly just tried to break out of that. Whatever that insecurity, whatever that self-loathing was, I just had to keep shaking it off one by one. And then I started really looking at people's faces. And then when I started seeing people singing along, happy, smiling, dancing, crying, and I was like, oh, wait, I'm, this is what I do is good. I'm good at this, even when I think I'm terrible at it. And so that was, honestly, it was the crowds, and just kind of just then reconnecting with and touching people, and all of a sudden realizing, not all of a sudden realizing, but slowly that drip of life affirming joy and the power of and how great all this stuff is. Yeah. I absorbed it. It was gone for a while, but I was able to it soaked back into me slowly.
That's great to hear. Thank you on behalf of so many of us.
Yeah,
it's awesome.
No, I mean, I'm very thankful for people who the fact that people like what I've done is a real. I cling to that. I mean, it's ego, but it's precious to me. I appreciate people that pay attention, and so it goes both ways.
Cheers for watching. This is 101 Part-Time Jobs. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, and all podcast apps. We've done interviews with Aurora, Kneecap, Idols, Lauren Mayberry of Churches, and loads more. So tap into 101 part-time jobs on Spotify, Apple, and all podcast apps.